today. You see, China's activities are affecting not only China, but they are affecting the entire world. Yet, China is more bothered about its economy rather than mankind. Moving on to my rebuttal, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, the members of the opposition have come up and said that we, the proposition, are making a hypothesis. We aren't saying that a natural disaster is coming, neither are we saying that mankind will wipe itself out by nuclear war. All that we are trying to say is that according to present indicators, according to present facts, according to present figures, mankind is swiftly progressing towards the end. Because mankind's problems are on the increase and mankind's unity is on the decline. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, they came up and talked about mankind's medical progress. We agree, mankind has made rapid progress in the field of medicine. But I ask you, is this progress enough to battle the problems faced by mankind today? No, ladies and gentlemen, they are not. That's why these problems exist today. Moving on, ladies and gentlemen, they came up and talked about global warming. They said global warming will cause an increase in temperature and man will adapt. But is global warming going to cause only an increase in temperature? Freshwater crisis, increase of diseases, decrease of land area, decrease of agricultural land. All these factors will contribute towards the end. It is not going to lead us towards a positive direction. Moving on, ladies and gentlemen, they came up and said that there are environmental agencies in our world today. We agree there are environmental agencies in the world, but does that not emphasize the surrounding darkness that has engulfed mankind? Ladies and gentlemen, the more NGOs come up, the more environmental agencies come up, the more people like Mother Teresa enter this world, shows us that they are beacons of light in the surrounding darkness.
The Martiniere from Lucknow to present his point of view for his team. Deep Chowdhury from the Martiniere, Lucknow.
I am sure all of us have heard the alarming predictions that our opponents have made all evening. In the 50,000-year history of mankind, there have been several occasions when mankind almost seemed heading for annihilation. But has the human race come even remotely close to extinction? In more recent times, mankind has been threatened by cholera, plague, HIV, SARS, and bird flu. But it has not only survived, it is multiplying by leaps and bounds. The human race has survived 2 world wars and numerous astrological predictions of global doom. Let us now shift gear, look into the future, and address some of the current threats. Depletion of fossil fuels, development of weapons of mass destruction, global warming, and international terrorism. Over the last decade, we have often heard how the world will screech to a halt once our oil reserves run dry. Cars and aeroplanes will grind to a halt, our homes will be without gas and power, and we will perish. Do any of you think that this will actually happen? Necessity is the mother of invention. Scientists and governments have intensified their search for means to harvest renewable sources of energy. Cars running on electricity have already hit the roads, solar heaters have become trendy and popular, and nuclear power plants and windmills are generating up to 50% of the energy requirements in several developed nations. Given another 20 years, and we will say goodbye to fossil fuels cheerfully long before they are actually exhausted. Let us now take up the issue of mass destruction as put up by the proposition. The situation could not have been worse than what it was in 1945, when the first and only atom bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I am sure many then thought that mankind was doomed to annihilate itself in the near future. In the 60 years since then, at least 8 countries have made and tested nuclear bombs. The United Nations organization currently lists 16 conflict zones in this world, yet mankind has not used nuclear weapons and destroyed itself. It is because self-preservation is the first law of life, and I'm sure the human race well realizes which way it is heading and has the capability to bring about a mid-course correction in its path. The latest topic for pessimists to rue about is global warming, which they fear will wipe out mankind in about a few years' time. There is, however, a big if in it. If and only if the current trend of carbon dioxide emissions continue. The recent World Summit at Bangkok charted out the current emission rates by all the countries in the world and gave the estimates or the reductions that need to be made. China, the third highest emitter of carbon dioxide in this world, had adopted a recalcitrant attitude at the summit 4 months ago, but softened its stand after unprecedented floods claimed 600 lives in their country. Mankind has intelligence and the unique ability to reason and realize which way it is heading. It is capable of changing itself and improving its work. Let me now tell you a real story. When the Russian space station Mir was being brought back to the Earth after 10 long years in space, there was some apprehension that the trajectory of the huge mass may go wrong and that it may hit Hong Kong instead of dropping into the Pacific Ocean. One young resident of Hong Kong panicked and committed suicide in anticipation of the disaster, and Mir dropped into the Pacific Ocean the very next day without causing harm to anyone. To conclude, cowards die many times before their death. And we in the opposition are certainly not cowards. Despite what the proposition has said, we will stay calm and valiant till the end of time, because we know that what they have said is because of their fear, which in no way is going to shake our faith in the continuance of human life on this planet. Thank you.
In very Shakespearean language, telling us that we don't have to really worry about what is our fate. Now I will request Abhishek Bajpai from Lucknow, who will sum up against the motion for his teammates.
Having heard almost all the arguments that the proposition had to make, allow me to tell you how irrelevant, illogical, and unreasonable they were. Again and again, my opponents have been harping upon the point that some kind of devastating catastrophe will occur in the future which might lead us to an end. In that context, we have talked about natural disasters and other types of wars. The topic states that mankind is swiftly progressing towards the end. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a definite statement. My opponents have not given any examples which prove that mankind is progressing towards the end. They have only talked about threats. How many times do I have to repeat that we are not here to talk about imaginary and hypothetical situations? Can my opponents come up here and give assurance that one of these threats will turn out to be true? The answer is no. In that case, the motion stands defeated. The principal speaker of the proposition came up and talked about individuality. But I would like to tell you that this does not indicate that human beings are heading towards extinction. The word mankind refers to all human beings and not to small pockets of people from different parts of the world. And my opponents have failed to provide any examples which prove that all human beings will die in the near future. The proposition referred to man as a bystander. A bystander is a person who just stands and watches things happen. Let me tell you that if we would have been bystanders, we wouldn't even be aware of what is happening and we wouldn't be standing over here debating this issue. But unfortunately, we are. We are aware of what is going on and we are working against the threats to mankind. The third speaker of the proposition came up and agreed that there has been progress in the field of medicine. Thus, they also agree that the number of human beings is increasing, and along with that, they are saying that mankind is progressing towards the end. I just don't understand how can they do that. My opponents also mentioned that 3/4 of the total amount of water in China is unfit for drinking purposes. Now I would like to mention the process of reverse osmosis that has been developed by human beings, which can make salty water fit for drinking. Thus, this point of theirs is nullified. Another issue that has been pointed out by my opponents is that of the depletion of natural resources such as fuel, forests, and atmospheric oxygen. If we think over this issue logically, we realize that human beings have already found alternatives for these resources. Petroleum is getting depleted swiftly, but man has already discovered natural gas. The forest cover on the earth has reduced, but we already have substances which can be used as fuel and can be used to manufacture furniture instead of wood. As far as oxygen is concerned, let me tell you that human beings will evolve in order to adapt to conditions with low oxygen levels. We all are aware of the fact that human beings have existed since many years at high altitudes where the level of atmospheric oxygen is considerably low. Thus we see that new developments and adaptation will ensure the survival of mankind. Going back to the topic once again, we realize that my opponents have failed to clarify the meaning of the word swiftly in their speeches. The topic states that mankind is swiftly progressing towards the end. My opponents have not given any examples which prove that mankind is heading towards extinction at a breakneck speed. Leave alone speed, they have not even managed to prove that mankind is progressing towards the end. To conclude, I would just like to summarize the entire issue. We have talked about threats to mankind, but these are just threats and conjectures and are not real. Even if they are real, they do not have the required potential to put an end to mankind. We have talked about the progress of mankind. During the past few minutes, we also have realized that there is no evidence of a decline in the number of human beings on Earth. To cut a long story short, we realize that it is completely baseless to say that mankind is progressing towards the end. Finally, we will do well to remember that the positive message of mankind's future is tragically buried beneath the misunderstanding perpetuated by our opponents. Narrow-minded, erroneous interpretations of God's whole design for human life cast biblical prophecy and religion as a whole in a negative light, just as my opponents have done. Thank you.
End of mankind to merely the end of the physical aspect of mankind. But let me tell you one thing. Man is not just a collection of flesh and bones. He represents physical existence as well as those aspects of humanity that make us distinct from other animals. These aspects of humanity such as love, empathy, sympathy, compassion and truthfulness indeed make man unique in the animal kingdom. The members of the opposition have simply neglected this aspect of today's motion and have tried to brainwash you into believing that the amount of progress that we have made has outweighed the price that we have paid for the progress. But let me take down their arguments one by one. They come up here and say that man has made tremendous progress in the field of technology. But let me tell you one thing, that they have not progressed to an extent that they can actually ward off all the threats that man is facing in the world today. He may have invented the latest plasma TV, but he hasn't solved the problem of global warming. Ladies and gentlemen, these technological discoveries have made life comfortable for only a small part of the population. But what about the larger aspect of the population? The threat of extinction still looms over 6 billion people in the world today. Going back to the topic, ladies and gentlemen, what we the members of the proposition have been trying to say is two things. Firstly, mankind's life is plagued with abundant problems. Firestorms and, ladies and gentlemen, forest fires are occurring more and more often. Every day in the newspaper you come across an African who has died out of food shortage or a shortage of water. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come across numerous cases where farmers have suicided in the Vidarbha region of Maharashtra. And what does mankind do? He ignores the natural boundaries simply because they are inconvenient. He continues to pollute the environment and he continues to pollute the world that he is living in. Instead of uniting and fighting all these problems together, man is simply breaking apart due to selfish motives. And this is only worsening the condition for him. Instead of coming together and ameliorating our world, man is simply a bystander who is watching his world slip by his own eyes. Secondly, the characteristics that make us human are fast disappearing from our lives. My second speaker has given you numerous examples to show how we are being stripped of the very values that represent humanity. And so, we are approaching the end of mankind. Now let me give you an analogy to further consolidate this point. Consider a salt in a chemical analysis. This salt has a certain physical form, but its main properties are the chemical properties. When this salt loses chemical properties, it fails to be that salt any longer, even though it might be white or crystalline. This is what we, the members of the proposition, have been trying to prove to you, ladies and gentlemen, that even though man may exist physically, the very inherent values that represent mankind, the very values of humanity that mankind stands for, are being depleted, are coming to an end, and hence mankind is coming to an end as a symbol of the values of humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, we have given you facts. Facts which may seem stark, facts which may seem startling, but facts which are true nonetheless. In the account, life's account of checks and balances, mankind's account is reaching bankruptcy. The truth remains that man is moving towards the end, and he's moving towards it at breakneck speed. Thank you.
United, there is no unity in mankind itself, then how can we progress towards the future? Let me give you an example. There are two armies fighting each other in the war. One is united, where each soldier is willing to give his life away for the one standing next to him. The other army is characterized by soldiers who are so involved, so stressed in trying to save their own lives that they do not care about their kingdom, their army being the one who conquers the other one. And therefore, the answer to which army will eventually win is before us, the one which is united. And that is the problem that plagues mankind today, disunity among us. So I ask them, how can we possibly move to a future which is bright? All I see is a gloomy, a dark shadow that is engulfing us. And yes, mankind has not yet, but is going to in the future, reach the end. Thank you.
When he began speaking of mathematics, it brought back memories of my days in school. I could never figure out why 2 plus 2 was 4. I always got anything but 4. I only passed in mathematics once, and that is when I did my ICSE. I will now call upon Aviral Jain of MARTINIERE, Lucknow.
Progress is a continuous process. It is a journey towards achieving something, and is marked by a beginning and then the rising curve. The Oxford Dictionary defines progress as a movement towards achieving something. Thus, ladies and gentlemen, it is absurd to believe that mankind is progressing towards its end, because the word itself means moving towards the pinnacle. So how can one say that mankind is aiming for its own end? How many times have you heard it said? The world is coming to an end. Whenever someone writes or speaks on the subject, it conjures up images of fear and dread, gloom and doom. This is so because everybody thinks that their death is the end. But ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you that this applies only to an individual. Throughout the debate, my opponents have come up with examples which according to them concern entire mankind. But ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you all that in reality, they apply to a very minuscule section of the society, to a group or to a minority. But we are here to talk about the end of the entire human race and not a portion of it. Prophecies can have very dark overtones and leave an impression of total cataclysm when handled in an irresponsible manner. Every generation in history has thought that the end would come. But ladies and gentlemen, the earth is still turning and we are still standing here. There have been many prophecies of doom from people and civilizations throughout history. But ladies and gentlemen, all of them have proved to be false. The extinction or end of any species revolves around one basic vital factor: adaptability. If we look at the chronological meter, it is very much in evidence that ever since the arrival of man, his adaptability has increased by leaps and bounds. Today's science and technological advancements have made all dreams come true. Every obstacle and problem is tackled and eliminated as soon as possible. If a new virus crops up today, then within a month, its antivirus is launched globally in an attempt to eradicate it completely. Whatever seems to be a threat to mankind is eliminated immediately because of a progress in science and technology. So how can one say that mankind is swiftly progressing towards its end? Many today, like the economist Julian Simon, see advancing technology as an ever-increasing benefit for the human society. Our species is better off in just about every measurable material way, says Simon. And there is stronger reaction to believe that this progressive trend will continue, and ladies and gentlemen, continue indefinitely. The advancements in medical sciences are also very much in evidence. Medicine today can treat ailments thought to be fatal only a few years ago. Biotechnology and stem cell technology are creating evolutions almost every day. Many terminal diseases can now be treated. The transplant of vital organs is no more a fantasy. All these factors, ladies and gentlemen, are leading to an increase in the average lifespan of an individual. And I fail to see any way by which mankind can end swiftly. In April 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first man to orbit Earth in a spacecraft. 4 decades later, millions of people have more computing power on their desktops than Gagarin had in his entire spacecraft, and that too at a fraction of the cost. This is just one of the many examples that show the progressive trend of mankind. In the years to come, even if issues like global warming and greenhouse effect become a threat to planet Earth, then it won't be a surprise if man develops life on another planet or another extraterrestrial body. Genetic engineering and robotics too have moved out of the science fiction novels and moved into our daily newspapers. Scientists, biologists and genealogists are already working on ways to make man a resistant species which can bear all the forces of nature.
Good evening everyone, my name is Danveer Suri and I'm from Lucknow. The first speaker of the proposition came up and talked about deaths in Africa. The second speaker came up and talked about deaths in Africa. The third speaker came up and talked about deaths in Africa. And the fourth speaker also talked about absolutely right. Boys, please evolve out of this. Africa doesn't make the whole world. There are 7 continents, you know. And if 8,000 die every day, innumerable are born in the rest of the world.
Young ladies and gentlemen,
Members of the opposition have completely failed to see one point. Adaptability is a slow process. However, when a natural hazard hits you, it's a fast process. So when a tidal... Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Advait Jhunjhunwala from the batch of 2005. When you stand back and look at this motion, I feel that the opposition has made an error in focusing too narrowly on one aspect of mankind. I think the proposition actually got it right when they speak about mankind as a species that is defined by certain characteristics and values. Today, we as human beings are slowly stripping ourselves of these values that make us human. If you have a situation where there are people walking on this planet, human beings mind you, without the human values that characterize them, that make them mankind, you have essentially approached a situation where mankind has come to an end.
request the principal, Mr. Chakravarti, and our chief guest, Mr. Ireland, to please come up to the stage while we announce the results. Before we call out the results, I'm sure you're all anxiously waiting to know whether the motion has been carried or not. I'd like to request our chief guest to hand over the certificates of participation to our young debaters.